The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corner office on the 42nd floor of the Morrison building. Marcus Chen stood with his hands clasped behind his back, surveying the city below like a king overlooking his domain. At 38, he had built Chen Global Investments from nothing into a multi-billion-dollar empire. His tailored tone Ford suit fit perfectly over his athletic frame, and his dark hair was impeccably styled. Everything about Marcus screamed success, control, precision. But today, something felt different. A strange unease had settled on his chest since morning, though he couldn't pinpoint why. He shook it off, attributing it to the stress of the upcoming acquisition. His company was about to absorb a struggling tech firm, and the paperwork alone was monumental. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Chen, the new hire for the janitorial staff is here for orientation. Should I send her up, or have security handle it?" Marcus frowned. Why was his assistant bothering him with this? "Handle it yourself, Sarah. I don't have time for so. I apologize, but there has been a mix-up with HR. The supervisor is out sick, and I have 3 other appointments waiting. It'll just take 5 minutes to show her the supply room and review the schedule." Marcus sighed, pressing his fingers to his temple. "Fine. Send her to the conference room. He'll do it." He regretted the decision immediately. Marcus tended to do menial tasks. He had people for that. But lately, his therapist had been encouraging him to connect with employees at all levels and practice humility. Perhaps this was the universe's way of forcing his hand. 5 minutes later, Marcus entered the small conference room adjacent to his office. The woman standing by the window turned slowly, and for a moment, time seemed to suspend itself. She was in her late 50s, perhaps early 60s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her face was lined with the kind of wrinkles that spoke of hardship and sleepless nights. She wore the company's standard cleaning uniform, dark blue and practical, and carried herself with a quiet dignity despite her humble position. Her eyes were dark, almost black, and when they met Marcus, something flickered there. Recognition. Surprise. "Fear, Mr. Chen," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a tremor in it, subtle but unmistakable. "I am Margaret Lin. Thank you for taking the time to orient me personally. I know you are a busy man." Marcus felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. There was something familiar about her, though he couldn't place it. "It is no problem, Miss Lin. Let us make this quick. You will be responsible for the executive floors 40 through 43 hours out of 6 Polícia Militar T2 Amazonas, Monday through Friday. Sarah will provide you with the security codes and supply room access." Margaret nodded, clutching a worn purse against her side. Her hands trembled slightly. "I understand. I'll do my best work, Mr. Chen. I promise you that." "I am sure you will." Marcus glanced at his watch, already mentally moving on to his next meeting. "Do you have any questions?" She hesitated, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing again. Finally, she said, "Just one. Do you like working here? In this building, I mean, the city?" The question was so unexpected, so personal, that Marcus actually looked at her fully for the first time. That is an odd question for a new employee to ask. "I am sorry," Margaret said quickly, her cheeks flushing. "I just meant, it must be very different from where you grew up. I read that you were adopted, raised in California. This must feel very far from home." Now Marcus was truly unsettled. How did she know these details? His adoption was public record, yes, mentioned occasionally in business profiles, but for a janitor to have researched him so thoroughly. "Miss Lin, have we met before?" "No," she said, though quickly. "No, I read about you. You're a kid successful, inspiring, really." Marcus didn't believe her, but he had no reason to press the issue. "Well, thank you. Sarah will take care of the rest. Welcome to Chen Global." He left the room, but the encounter stayed with him. Throughout his meetings that afternoon, Marcus found his mind wandering back to Margaret Lin. Those eyes, the tremor in her voice, the way she looked at him as if seeing a ghost. That evening, long after the office had emptied, Marcus sat alone in his office, the city lights twinkling below. He couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened today, something that would change everything. On impulse, he opened his laptop and typed Margaret Lin's name into the company AR database. The field was sparse. She'd applied through a staffing agency, had limited work history in New York, and had listed an address in Queens. No emergency contact. No references beyond the agency. It was almost as if she'd appeared out of thin air. Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at her employee photo. There was something about the shape of her face, the set of her jaw. He pulled up a photo of himself on his phone, studying his own features. Was he imagining it, or was there resemblance? Ridiculous. He was being paranoid. Plenty of people had similar features, especially within the same ethnic community. But the thought, once planted, refused to leave. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus found himself staying late at the office more often, though he told himself it was because of the acquisition. In reality, he was waiting for Margaret. He would hear the soft sound of her cleaning cart in the hallway, the gentle swish of her mop, and find excuses to leave his office. Their interactions were brief, superficial. She was professional, efficient, almost invisible in the way good service workers learned to be. But Marcus noticed things. The way she always asked if he'd eaten dinner, as if genuinely concerned for his well-being. The way she'd occasionally pause when passing his office, as if wanting to say something but thinking better of it. The way her hands still trembled whenever he spoke to her directly. One Thursday evening, Marcus was reviewing contracts when he heard a crash from the hallway. He rushed out to find Margaret on her knees, surrounded by broken glass and spilled cleaning solution. Her hands were bleeding. Don't move, Marcus commanded, grabbing his phone. I'm calling security to send up first aid. No, please, Margaret said urgently, trying to gather the broken pieces with her bare hands. I'll clean it up. I'm so sorry, Mr. Chen. This won't happen again. Please don't fire me. The desperation in her voice stopped him cold. Fire you? For an accident? What kind of monster do you think I am? He knelt beside her, gently pulling her hands away from the glass. You ain't hurt. Come into my office. No, I can't. It's not appropriate. I'll just Miss Lin. Marcus's voice was firm but not unkind. Come into my office. Now. In his private bathroom, Marcus cleaned her cuts with surprising gentleness. Margaret sat on the closed toilet lid, watching him work in silence. The intimacy of the moment was not lost on either of them. You don't have to do this, Margaret whispered. I'm just a cleaning lady. You're a person, Marcus corrected, applying antiseptic. And you ain't hurt. This is basic human decency, not special treatment. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, which she blinked away quickly. You're a good man, Mr. Chen. Better than you probably realize. Why do you say it like that? Marcus asked it, finishing the bandaging. Like you know more? She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she said, you remind me of someone I used to know. Someone I cared about very much. Who? It doesn't matter. He is gone now. She started, flexing her bandaged hands. Thank you for your kindness. I should finish my work. But Marcus was tired of the evasions, the half-truths. Miss Lin, why did you really take this job? You were clearly educated, well-spoken. You could work somewhere that pays better, treats you better. Why here? Why now? Margaret met his eyes, and in that moment, Marcus saw such profound sadness that it nearly took his breath away. Because, she said softly, sometimes we need to be close to the things we've lost, even if we can never truly have them back. Before Marcus could respond, she slipped past you and disappeared down the hallway. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his penthouse apartment in Tribeca, staring at the ceiling, Margaret's words echoing in his mind. At 3 Amazonas, he made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his adoption papers, something he'd looked at only a handful of times since his adoptive parents had given them to him on his 18th birthday. David and Susan Chen had been wonderful parents, loving and supportive until their deaths in a car accident 5 years ago. They'd always been open about his adoption, telling him that his birth mother had been very young, unable to care for him, and had made the brave choice to give him a better life. The documents were frustratingly vague, as adoption records often were. His birth mother was listed only as Asian female, age 19, unmarried. No name, no identifying information. The adoption had been closed, finalized in Los Angeles in 1987. But there was one detail Marcos had never really considered before. His birthday, November 15, 1987, which meant he'd been born in late 1986 or early 1987, which meant his birth mother would now be in her late 50s. Exactly, Marcos' heart began to pound. He was being ridiculous. This was pure speculation, based on nothing but a feeling and some coincidental timing. Thousands of women fit the description. The chances that his birth mother had randomly ended up working in his building were astronomical, unless it wasn't too random at all. Marcos grabbed his laptop and started searching. He accessed databases he probably shouldn't have access to, using connections and resources that definitely crossed ethical lines. He searched for Margaret Lin's history, her past, any connection to Los Angeles in the late 1980s. What he found made his blood run cold. Margaret Lin had indeed lived in Los Angeles. She'd been 19 in 1986, and according to medical records he had no legal right to access. She'd given birth to a baby boy on November 15, 1987, at the same hospital listed on Marcos' adoption papers. The baby had been placed for adoption immediately. Marcos stared at the screen, his hands shaking. It couldn't be. It was impossible. The woman cleaning his office floors, the woman he'd barely noticed for weeks, was his biological mother. Why had she taken this job? Why hadn't she said anything? What did she want? A darker thought crept in. Was this some kind of con? Was she trying to get close to Chen, to manipulate him for money? Marcos had been burned before by people who wanted to exploit his wealth. Was this just a more elaborate version of that? But even as the thought formed, he dismissed it. The way Margaret looked at him, the sadness in her eyes, the trembling in her hands, it was all real. She wasn't a con artist. She was a mother looking at the son she'd given up 38 years ago. Marcos didn't sleep the rest of that night. By the time dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, he'd made another decision. He needed the truth. All of it. No more dancing around, no more half conversations. Tonight, he would confront Margaret Lin, and she would tell him everything. Marcos barely functioned during work that day. He snapped at his assistant, botched a conference call with investors, and couldn't focus on even the simplest tasks. By 6 Polícia Militar, when the office began to empty, his nerves were stretched to the breaking point. He waited in his office with the lights dimmed, listening for the sound of Margaret's cart. At 7:15, he heard it. The soft squeak of wheels, the gentle clink of supplies. He stepped into the hallway. Miss Lin, my office. Now, Margaret looked up, startled. Mr. Chen, he didn't realize you were still here. Is something wrong? You tell me. Marcos held the door open, his expression unreadable. Please. Margaret hesitated, then slowly pushed her cart aside and entered his office. Marcos closed the door behind her and gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. She sat, perched on the edge of the seat like a bird ready to take flight. Marcos remained standing, arms crossed. For a long moment, he just looked at her, really looked at her. Now that he knew, he could see it. The same dark eyes, the same stubborn set of the jaw, the same slight upturn of the nose. How had he missed it before? Your name isn't Margaret Lin, is it? Marcos said quietly. Margaret's face went pale. I don't know what you please. Marcos' voice cracked. Please don't lie to me anymore. I know who you are. I accessed records I shouldn't have. Invaded privacy I had no right to invade. But I know. You were her. You were my birth mother. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and irrevocable. Margaret's composure crumbled. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed her hands to her mouth, as if trying to hold back a sob. How long have you known? She finally whispered. About me? Since last night. But I want to know how long you've known about me. About who I am. Margaret wiped her tears with shaking hands. 3 years. I saw your picture in Business Insider. Read about your success. The article mentioned you were adopted, born in Los Angeles on November 15, 1987. I knew. Call it mother's intuition or coincidence or fate, but I knew you were my son. 3 years. Marcus felt anger rising alongside the confusion and pain. You've been known for 3 years and you never reached out, never tried to contact me. How could he? Margaret's voice was anguished. What right did I have? I gave you up. I signed away my rights to you. I had no claim to you, no place in your life. You were better off without me, so you took a job cleaning my office. That was your solution. Marcus began pacing, his carefully controlled demeanor fracturing. You watched me from the shadows like some kind of ghost. Do you have any idea how disturbing that is? I know. Margaret stood, her old anger sparking. I know it is wrong. I know it is crazy, but I just wanted to be near you. To see that you were okay, that you were happy. You have to understand, Marcus, not a single day has gone by in 38 years that I've even thought about you. Not one day that I've even wondered if I made the right choice, if you were soft, if you were loved. I was loved, Marcus shouted, surprising himself with his vehemence. David and Susan Chen were incredible parents. They gave me everything. They loved me unconditionally. His voice broke. They made me who I am. I know they did, Margaret said softly, sitting back down. And I am grateful to them. More grateful than you can possibly imagine. But that doesn't change the fact that you were my son. I carried you inside me for 9 months. I felt you move, heard your first cry, held you for exactly 20 minutes before they took you away. 20 minutes, Marcus. That is all I got. The raw pain in her voice got through Marcus's anger. He sank into his desk chair, suddenly exhausted. Why? Why did you give me up? Margaret was quiet for a long moment, staring at her bandaged hands. When she spoke, her voice was distant, as if she were looking back through a long tunnel of years. I was 19 years old, working as a waitress in Los Angeles. I'd come to America 20 years earlier, hoping for a better life. I was alone, no family, barely spoke English. I met a man, an American businessman. She smiled bitterly. He was charming, successful, said all the right things. We had an affair. When I got pregnant, he wanted nothing to do with me. Gave me money for an abortion and told me to disappear. Marcus felt sick, and you kept me instead. I tried, Margaret said, tears flowing again. God, I tried so hard. I worked 3 jobs, saved every penny, but I was so young, so scared, so alone. I had no healthcare, no support system. I went into labor a month early, working a double shift at a diner. They rushed me to the hospital, and when you were born, you were so small, so perfect. Her voice wavered. The nurse put you in my arms, and I looked at your face, and I knew he couldn't give you what you needed. I was living in a roach-infested studio apartment, working 80 hours a week just to make rent. What kind of life was that for a baby? So you gave up, Marcus said, but there was less accusation in his voice now. So I made the hardest decision of my life, Margaret corrected gently. I chose your future over my present. The social worker told me about the Chen, a nice couple who'd been trying for years to have a baby. They were stable, loving, financially secure. Everything you wasn't there. So I signed the papers, and I let you go. Marcus rubbed his eyes, feeling the sting of tears he refused to shed. What happened after? What did you do? I fell apart, Margaret admitted. I went back to Taiwan for a few years, but he couldn't settle. I eventually returned to the States, moved to New York. I worked different jobs, lived different lives, but nothing ever felt right. I never married, never had other children. How could he? Every child I saw your face. Every birthday, November 15th, I spent alone, wondering what you looked like, what you were doing, if you were happy. Then 3 years ago, I saw your picture. My son, a successful businessman, brilliant, confident, everything he'd hoped you to become. And I knew I had to see you just once, in person. He didn't plan to take the job here. I came to New York thinking they'd just see your building, maybe catch a glimpse of you through a window, and then go home. But then I saw the job posting, and I thought, she shrugged helplessly. I thought maybe I could be near you, even if you never knew who I was. Marcus absorbed this, the full weight of it settling over him. His entire life, he had a mother watching from afar, loving him from a distance, suffering in silence. The knowledge was overwhelming. You should have told me, he said finally. When you took the job, when you met me, you should have been honest. Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was trying to exploit you, to get money from you? Margaret met his eyes. You're a wealthy man, Marcus. People lead to you all the time. I'm sure. Why would I be any different? She was right, of course. If she'd approached him with this story, he would have had her investigated, dismissed her claims, maybe even had her arrested for harassment. The only reason he believed her now is because he did discover the truth himself. So what happens now? Marcus asked. What do you want from me? Margaret stood, smoothing down her uniform. Nothing. I want nothing from you except what we already had. These few weeks of being near you. Now that you know the truth, I'll resign, of course. I'll leave you alone. I am sorry for the deception, for the pain we caused. That was never my intention. Wait. Marcus stood as well. You were just going to leave. Just like that. What else can I do? You were angry, and you have every right to be. I overstepped, invaded your life. The best thing I can do now is disappear again. Stop saying it. Marcus's voice rose. Stop talking about disappearing. You already disappeared once, 38 years ago. Don't you think that's enough? Margaret stared at him, shocked. What are you saying? Marcus didn't know. The words had come out before he fully formed the thought. But now that he said them, he realized they were true. I am saying. I don't know what I am saying. I am angry, yes. I am confused and overwhelmed and I don't know how to process any of this. But I am also, he struggled for the words, curious, about you, about where I came from. My adoptive parents, they were amazing, but there were always questions they couldn't answer. Medical history, genetic traits, family background. Things only you can tell me. I can write it all down, Margaret offered quickly. Everything you want to know. I'll put it in a letter and it knew. Marcus surprised himself again. Not a letter. I think I want to talk. To get to know you. Not as my mother. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But as a person. As Margaret Lin. The woman who gave me life and then gave me up so I could have a better one. Margaret, as the tears flowed freely now. But there was hope in her eyes. Are you sure? I don't want to impose on your life, Marcus. You owe me nothing. Maybe not, Marcus agreed, but I owe it to myself to understand my own story. All of it, even the parts that are painful and complicated. He moved to his desk, pulling out a business card and writing something on the back. This is my personal cell phone. Not many people have it. I want you to call me this weekend. We'll meet somewhere neutral, somewhere we can talk. Really talk. Margaret took the card with trembling hands, clutching it like a precious artifact. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what this means to me. I think I'm starting to, Marcus said. Then, acting on an impulse he didn't fully understand, he stepped forward and embraced her. It was brief, awkward to strangers trying to bridge an impossible gap. But it was a start. When Margaret left his office that night, Marcus stood at his window, watching the city lights blur through tears he finally allowed himself to shed. His life had been turned upside down, every certainty questioned, every assumption challenged, but beneath the confusion and pain, there was something else, something he hadn't expected. Relief. For 38 years, there had been a hole in his life, a question mark where part of his identity should have been. Now, that hole had a shape, a face, a name. Margaret Lin, his birth mother. Not a replacement for the parents who raised him, but a piece of the puzzle he hadn't known was missing. That Saturday, Marcus met Margaret at a small Korean restaurant in Queens, far from the Manhattan power corridors where he was usually recognized. She arrived early, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, looking younger and less burdened than she had in her cleaning uniform. They sat across from each other in a corner booth, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Then Marcus said, "Tell me about Taiwan, about where you came from." And she did. Margaret spoke for hours, her voice soft but steady, painting a picture of her childhood in Taipei, her dreams of America, the harsh realities she'd faced when those dreams collided with truth. She told him about his biological father, a man whose name she'd never learned it beyond a first name that was probably fake. She told him about the pregnancy, the fear, the impossible choices. Marcus listened, asking questions, absorbing every detail. He told her about his own childhood, about David and Susan Chen, about growing up in San Francisco, about building his business from nothing. They discovered shared traits, from a love of classical music to an inability to handle spicy food, from perfectionist tendencies to a dry sense of humor. As the afternoon turned to evening, something shifted between them. The awkwardness faded, replaced by a cautious warmth. They went into mother and son, not yet, perhaps not ever in the traditional sense, but they were connected, bound by biology and choice and circumstance. When they finally parted, Marcus hugged her again, less awkwardly this time. "Same team next week?" he asked. Margaret smiled, truly smiled, and it transformed her face. They liked it very much. Over the following months, they developed a routine. Every Saturday, they'd meet somewhere different. Sometimes they'd eat, sometimes they'd walk through Central Park, sometimes they'd simply sit in coffee shops and talk. Marcus learned about Margaret's life, the decades of quiet struggle, the jobs she'd worked, the loneliness she'd endured. In turn, he began to help her in small ways. He paid for her to move to a better apartment, not in his building but close enough that she didn't have to commute 2 hours each way. He connected her with educational opportunities, helping her pursue a degree she'd always wanted but could never afford. He never offered her money directly, understanding that her pride wouldn't allow it, but he found ways to improve her quality of life without making her feel like a charity cause. Most importantly, he introduced her to parts of his world. Not the business dinners or charity galas, not yet, but smaller moments. A concert at Carnegie Hall, a visit to the Museum of Modern Art, a weekend trip to the Catskills. Slowly, carefully, they wove themselves into each other's lives. Marcus's friends and colleagues noticed the change in him. He seemed softer somehow, less driven by pure ambition and more interested in meaningful connections. He started a scholarship fund for young, single mothers trying to better their lives, inspired by Margaret as a story. He volunteered at adoption support organizations, speaking openly for the first time about his own experience. And Margaret flourished. The weight of decades of grief and guilt began to lift. She enrolled in community college, pursuing a degree in social work. She made friends, joined book clubs, allowed herself to have a life beyond her long-held vigil for the son she'd lost. One evening, nearly a year after that fateful night in his office, Marcus invited Margaret to his penthouse for dinner. He'd cooked himself, a clumsy but earnest attempt at her favorite Taiwanese dishes. As they ate, looking out over the glittering Manhattan skyline, Margaret said, "You know, when I gave you up, I used to imagine what your life would be like. I pictured you happy, successful, loved, but I never imagined this. I never imagined you'd get to be part of it." Marcus reached across the table, taking her hand. "I never imagined it either, but I am glad we are. Both of us." Muto. Margaret squeezed his hand. "Marcus, I want you to know something. I am not trying to replace your mother, the woman who raised you. Susan Chen will always be your real mother. I am just grateful to be in your life in whatever capacity you were comfortable with." "I know," Marcus said, "and I appreciate that. But Margaret, you were part of my story too. You always have been, even when you didn't know it. You gave me life, and then you gave me the chance at a better one. That took a kind of love and courage I am only beginning to understand." They were both crying now, but they were tears of healing, not pain. Tears of beginning, not ending. "There is something I want to ask you," Marcus said, releasing her hand and standing. He retrieved a small box from a drawer and returned to the table. "I had this made for you." Inside was a simple silver necklace with two pendants. One was engraved with November 15, 1987, his birthday. The other was engraved with today's date, The first that is when you gave me life, Marcos explained. The second that is when you gave me the truth, and when I chose to let you back in. Both are important. Both matter. Margaret put on the necklace with shaking hands, touching the pendant reverently. You'll wear it every day, she promised. I know, Marcos said, smiling. Just like I know you will. I'll be at Sunday dinner next week, and the week after that, and every week for as long as we both want this. I want this, Margaret said fiercely. More than anything. Then that is settled. Marcos raised his wine glass. To second chances. To the family we were born into and the family we choose. To finding each other when we thought all was lost. Margaret raised her own glass, her eyes shining. To my son, who became everything I hoped for and more. They clinked glasses as the city sparkled below them. Two people who they spent decades apart now finding their way back to each other. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, because life isn't a fairy tale. There would be difficult days ahead, old wounds that still needed healing, complicated emotions to navigate, but it was a beginning, and sometimes, that's all anyone really needs. The story of Marcos, Chen, and Margaret Lin spread through whispers in the building, then in wider circles. Some people saw it as a beautiful reunion, others as a cautionary tale about privacy and boundaries. But those who knew them best understood the truth. It was a story about love in its most fundamental form. The love of a mother who made an impossible sacrifice. The love of a son who chosen forgiveness over bitterness. The love that persists even when separated by time, distance, and circumstance. And on quiet Saturday afternoons, when they sat together in Central Park watching the seasons change, both of them felt the same thing. Gratitude. For second chances, for courage, for the unexpected ways that life brings us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it most. The wealthy businessman had discovered that his new employee was his biological mother. But more than that, he discovered that wealth had nothing to do with money and everything to do with connection. That success wasn't measured in billions, but in the bonds we forge and the love we dare to accept. In the end, Marcos Chen learned what Margaret Lin had known for 38 years. Some losses are temporary, some endings are really beginnings, and some love is strong enough to survive anything, even decades of separation. And that was worth more than all the money in the world.